Ting, ting, ting. The sound of a spoon hitting a champagne glass cut through the room so sharply that even the band stopped mid-note. 200 people turned toward my dad, expecting a warm, expensive wedding toast. Instead, they got a public disaster so brutal it didn't even feel real at first. The 5-tier cake, this ridiculous, glossy, perfect for Instagram cake, was already leaning like it had given up. Someone had bumped the table in the chaos, and the next thing I saw was white frosting sliding down like paint. Then the whole thing tipped. A $5,000 cake hit the floor with a sickening thud, and the room made that collective sound people make when they're watching a car crash and can't look away. Vanessa, my dad's 26-year-old bride, grabbed the front of her dress and ran straight through the double doors, crying so hard her makeup was streaking down her cheeks. My dad went red in the face, stormed toward the DJ booth, and started yelling like he could scream reality back into place. And me? I stood by the open bar with a Diet Coke in my hand, watching it all like I'd been waiting for this exact moment. 'Cause I had. On Jenny's Karma Diaries, you hear a lot of stories about people who think they can rewrite the truth in public. My dad tried. He really tried. He spent about $80,000 on this wedding to prove he was a changed man. But when he tapped the microphone and called me a mistake in front of everyone, he didn't know I was the one controlling the audio system. My name is Lisa, and this is my story. Before I rewind and tell you how we got here, do me a quick favor. If you love revenge and karma stories where the villain does it to themselves, hit like, share, and subscribe right now. And comment this for me. Have you ever had someone insult you in public and then act like you were too sensitive for reacting? I want to know because what my dad did next was the moment I stopped being polite. He lifted his glass like he was the hero of the night. Vanessa's parents were smiling proudly at their table. His business friends, clients, partners, people who mattered to him were watching closely. He cleared his throat, enjoying the attention, enjoying the power. Then he looked straight at me. He didn't even try to hide it. He smiled like he was about to make a joke, the kind of joke that only works when the target stays quiet. And that's when I realized something important. He wasn't just giving a toast. He was testing me. In front of everyone. The DJ glanced at me from his booth, waiting for my cue because earlier that week my dad had happily handed me the job of handling the slideshow and music to save money. He thought it proved I was finally being useful. What he didn't understand was that he'd handed the controls to the one person he'd spent years humiliating. My dad has always been the kind of man who thinks money is the same thing as respect. He's a wealthy businessman, the type who wears confidence like a tailored suit and talks to people like they're invoices. Growing up, I learned early that in his world you're either an asset or you're a problem. When I was little, I used to believe he was just strict, that he had high standards. That one day, if I did everything right, he'd finally look at me the way he looked at other people's kids. Proud. Soft. Human. But then my mom got sick. Not the kind of sick you can ignore. Not the kind where you bring soup and take cute pictures for social media. Kind of sick that makes hospital bills pile up and makes your house feel heavy. In the US, healthcare can break a family even when you do everything right. Appointments, tests, medications, phone calls that never end. And my dad? He didn't lean in. He leaned out. First, he acted concerned in public. He'd put an arm around my mom in front of doctors, ask a few questions, and then look at his watch like her illness was taking too long. And when things got harder, he got colder. Then one day he told her straight-faced that he couldn't live like this. He left. Just left. I was still a kid, and I remember standing in our doorway watching his car pull away, trying to understand how a person can walk out on someone who needs them most. My mom didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just stood there with this quiet, stunned expression that I'll never forget. That was the first time I learned what abandonment looks like when it's wearing expensive cologne. After the divorce, he built a new life fast. New house. New friends. New version of himself. And every time I saw him, he acted like the past was something I should get over, like he hadn't ripped the floor out from under us. As I got older, it became even clearer where I stood. I wasn't the child he bragged about. I was the reminder. The leftover. I worked 2 jobs the moment I could. One during the day, one at night. I paid my own rent. I paid my own bills. I learned to be independent because depending on him always came with a price tag and a lecture. And still, every time he saw me, he'd find a way to make me feel small. "You're not ambitious," he'd say, as if survival was an effort. As if carrying yourself without a safety net wasn't ambition. Then Vanessa entered the picture. Vanessa was 26, Instagram perfect, and always sweet in a way that felt practiced. You know that fake nice smile people do when they want to look kind, but they don't want to be kind? That was her. She called my dad babe in this baby voice, took selfies every time her food arrived, and posted quotes about family while quietly trying to erase me from the frame. She loved the idea of being a bride more than she loved the idea of being a wife. It was all aesthetics and applause. And my dad? He loved how she made him look. A younger woman on his arm. A big wedding. A reset button. He kept saying the same phrase to anyone who would listen. "This is my second chance." But I noticed something. He never said it like he was grateful. He said it like he'd earned it. When he announced the wedding, he didn't call to ask me how I felt. He called to give instructions. "You'll be there," he said. Not, "I want you there." Not, "It would mean a lot." Just, "You'll be there." I tried to say no. I told him I had work shifts. I told him I didn't want the tension. I told him I didn't want to pretend. That's when he used the one thing he knew could still pull me into his orbit. My grandfather's trust. My mom's father had set up something years ago. Nothing flashy, but enough to help with education and a stable start. My dad wasn't the owner of it, but he had connections and influence around it, and he loved using it like a weapon. He knew I worried about money. He knew I didn't have anyone else to fall back on. He said, "If you don't come to the wedding and act happy, don't expect a dime. I'll make sure you're cut out." I went quiet. My stomach tightened, and I hated that he could still do that to me. Not because I wanted his money. I didn't. I wanted safety. I wanted stability that didn't depend on someone who enjoyed controlling me. Then he added like it was nothing, "And Lisa? Don't embarrass me." That was the real reason he wanted me there. Not love. Not family. Photos. Optics. Proof for his clients and his new life that he was a good man with a happy family. Vanessa took over right after. She texted me a long message full of hearts and fake warmth. "So excited you'll be there. It means so much to your dad." Then she sent a list of things I shouldn't wear because it might clash with the wedding vibe. She loved the idea of being a bride more than she loved the idea of being a wife. It was all aesthetics and applause. And my dad? He loved how she made him look. A younger woman on his arm. A big wedding. A reset button. He kept saying the same phrase to anyone who would listen. "This is my second chance." But I noticed something. He never said it like he was grateful. He said it like he'd earned it. When he announced the wedding, he didn't call to ask me how I felt. He called to give instructions. "You'll be there," he said. Not, "I want you there." Not, "It would mean a lot." Just, "You'll be there." I tried to say no. I told him I had work shifts. I told him I didn't want the tension. I told him I didn't want to pretend. That's when he used the one thing he knew could still pull me into his orbit. My grandfather's trust. My mom's father had set up something years ago. Nothing flashy, but enough to help with education and a stable start. My dad wasn't the owner of it, but he had connections and influence around it, and he loved using it like a weapon. He knew I worried about money. He knew I didn't have anyone else to fall back on. He said, "If you don't come to the wedding and act happy, don't expect a dime. I'll make sure you're cut out." I went quiet. My stomach tightened, and I hated that he could still do that to me. Not because I wanted his money. I didn't. I wanted safety. I wanted stability that didn't depend on someone who enjoyed controlling me. Then he added like it was nothing, and Lisa? Don't embarrass me. That was the real reason he wanted me there. Not love. Not family. Photos. Optics. Proof for his clients and his new life that he was a good man with a happy family. Vanessa took over right after. She texted me a long message full of hearts and fake warmth. So excited you'll be there. It means so much to your dad. Then she sent a list of things I shouldn't wear because it might clash with the wedding vibe. She even suggested I sit toward the back so the photos look clean. I stared at my phone for a long time, feeling that familiar mix of anger and exhaustion. And I told myself I'd do what I always did. Get through it. That's the truth. I didn't show up to ruin anything. I didn't show up with revenge in my pocket. I just wanted to survive the weekend without being humiliated and then go back to my life. But narcissists don't let you just exist. They need you to play your role. They need a scapegoat. They need someone to gaslight when things go wrong. And I was always the easiest target. So I booked the cheapest hotel room I could find, kept my shifts covered, and promised myself one thing: I wouldn't react. I wouldn't cry in front of them. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Quick question for you, and I really want you to comment this. If your parent threatened your future just to control you, would you still go to the wedding to keep the peace? Or would you cut contact, even if it cost you? 'Cause the night before the wedding at the rehearsal dinner, I heard one sentence that changed everything. And after that, I didn't want peace anymore. The rehearsal dinner was at one of those restaurants that tries a little too hard to look effortless. Low golden lighting, white tablecloths, crystal glasses, and waiters who glide around like they're trained not to make eye contact unless you look expensive. My dad loved places like that. He loved the way people sat up straighter when he walked in. He loved being the loudest laugh at the table. He loved ordering for everyone like it was a gift. Vanessa walked in on his arm like she was already practicing for the wedding photos. Hair perfect, skin glowing, nails done, phone in her hand even before she sat down. She kissed his cheek and smiled at the table like a politician. And when she hugged me, her arms barely touched me. It was that fake embrace where the camera sees it, but your body doesn't feel it. You made it, she said, sweet as syrup. I'm so happy you're here. My dad didn't even look up from his drink. He just nodded like I'd arrived on schedule. I took my seat and reminded myself of my plan. Stay calm, say as little as possible, make it through the weekend. I had already promised myself I wouldn't give them a reaction. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't hand them a moment they could twist into Lisa is unstable. Because that's what people like my dad do. They poke you until you bleed, then call you dramatic for staining the carpet. Dinner started with speeches from Vanessa's side. Her parents were the kind of people who still believe in image like it's a religion. Her mom kept calling Vanessa our angel, and her dad kept making jokes about how my dad better behave. My dad laughed loudest, of course. He kept talking about the wedding like it was a business win. 80,000, he said at one point, like he was proud of the number. But you only get married like this once. Vanessa giggled and leaned into him. It's going to be iconic. Then my dad looked across the table at me and smiled the way he smiles when he's about to say something that sounds like a joke, but isn't. Lisa's helping with the slideshow, he announced. Figured she could finally contribute something. A few people chuckled politely. Vanessa squeezed his arm like he was adorable. My throat tightened, but I kept my face neutral and lifted my water glass like I was unbothered. Inside, I was counting how many times in 1 hour he managed to remind everyone I was less than him. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself to the restroom. Not because I needed to go. 'Cause I needed air. In the hallway outside the dining room, the noise dropped to a softer hum. I walked slowly, letting my shoulders loosen, letting my breathing settle. That's when I heard my dad's voice around the corner. He wasn't whispering. He didn't need to. He spoke like he owned every room he stood in, even the hallway. "Don't worry, babe," he said, confident and careless. "Once the wedding is done, I'm cutting my daughter off completely." I froze. My hand tightened around my phone without thinking, but I didn't pull it out. I didn't move. I just listened. He kept going like he was talking about canceling a subscription. "She's just a mistake from my first marriage," he said. "A bad investment." My stomach dropped so hard it felt like my body went cold. Then Vanessa laughed. Not awkward. Not uncomfortable. She laughed like it was funny. "Good," she said. "I don't want that loser around our real family." I stood there, perfectly still, while those words landed and spread through me like poison. Mistake. Loser. Real family. In that moment, I understood the whole weekend. I wasn't invited because they wanted me there. I was invited because they needed me there. For the photos. For the illusion. So my dad could point to me and say, "Look, I'm a family man," while planning to erase me the second it was convenient. And the worst part? They weren't even being careful. They were comfortable. That's how normal it was to them. I should tell you what I felt right then because it wasn't what people expect. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even feel surprised. I felt clear. Like something inside me finally stopped hoping. I stepped back quietly before they could see me, walked to the restroom, and stared at myself in the mirror under harsh bathroom lighting. My face looked calm, but my eyes looked different. Like I'd finally accepted that the man who raised me was never going to love me in a healthy way. And that was the exact second revenge became an option. Not loud revenge. Not messy revenge. Kind of revenge that lets the truth do the damage. I walked back to the table with the same neutral expression I'd worn all night. I sat down, smoothed my napkin, and smiled lightly when Vanessa asked, "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just needed a minute." My dad didn't even look at me. He was too busy performing for the table, telling stories about how hard work pays off, like he hadn't abandoned my mom the moment life got hard. And that's when I realized the real red flag wasn't just what he said in the hallway. It was how easily he could say it. Like I was an inconvenience he was finally about to remove. So I stayed. I stayed through dessert. I stayed through the fake laughter. I stayed through Vanessa's bridesmaids taking selfies. I stayed while my dad smiled and acted like the generous hero of the weekend. And all the while I was thinking one thing: you want a perfect wedding? Fine. I'll give you a perfect moment. Right in front of everyone. Now I want to ask you something, and I really want you to comment it because I read these. If you overheard your own father call you a mistake, would you leave immediately to protect your peace, or would you stay, keep smiling, and make sure karma showed up on schedule? And if you're the kind of person who would stay for revenge, go ahead and hit like on this video, because the next part is where I stop being the unambitious daughter and become the helpful daughter. The one who offers to handle the slideshow and music. The one who gets access to the entire room's attention. 'Cause once I knew my dad planned to humiliate me in public eventually, I decided I would choose the timing. For the rehearsal dinner, I went back to my hotel room and I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the wall like it might explain how a father can say something like that so easily. My chest felt tight, but my mind was strangely quiet. Not numb, just focused. Because crying wasn't going to protect me. Confronting him wasn't going to change him. And if I walked away, he'd still get his perfect wedding, his perfect photos, and his perfect little story about how his ungrateful daughter couldn't even show up. So I made a different choice. I decided I would be helpful. The next morning, I showed up early to the venue for the final walkthrough. Vanessa was already there with a planner, 2 bridesmaids, and a phone tripod. She was filming herself behind the scenes, smiling like the world was her audience. My dad walked in behind her, chest out, acting like the place belonged to him because he paid for it. He saw me and blinked like he was surprised I was still cooperating. "You're on time," he said, like that was my only value. I smiled gently. "I want this to go smoothly," I said. He loved hearing that. Men like him always do. They don't want accountability. They want obedience that sounds like maturity. I waited until we were near the reception area, where the DJ was setting up his speakers and the venue coordinator was checking cables. Then I said it casual and sweet, like I was offering a gift. "Dad, I've been thinking," I said. "You don't need to pay extra for an AV guy. I can handle the slideshow and the music playlist for the reception. I'll save you money. And it'll be one less thing for you to worry about." My dad's eyes lit up immediately. Not because he trusted me. 'Cause he loved saving money when it made him feel smart. "How much would that save?" he asked. The DJ, who looked exhausted already, shrugged. If they wanted full-time AV support, it could have been a couple grand depending on the package. My dad turned back to me, satisfied. "Finally," he said, loud enough for the DJ to hear. "You're being useful." I nodded like it didn't sting, because I wasn't here for his approval anymore. I was here for access. Within minutes, my laptop was connected to the system. The DJ showed me the basics, how to switch inputs, where the volume controls were, how the projector feed worked. I asked questions like I was just trying to do a good job. I took notes. I smiled. I thanked him. And while my dad strutted around bragging about how hands-on his family was, I quietly made sure the settings were under my control. Then came the part that made everything possible. Vanessa wanted to practice her first dance entry and record it for social media. She also wanted to test how her voice sounded on the wireless mic because she planned to do a surprise little speech later. The venue had a wireless mic system with a receiver that fed into the DJ's setup. The DJ handed me the receiver feed and said, "Just run a quick sound check. Make sure there's no weird distortion." So I did. I opened the audio settings on my laptop and started a clean test recording the way you do when you're checking levels. Nothing dramatic. Nothing illegal. Just a normal professional thing. Vanessa clipped the mic pack on, smoothed her hair, and laughed with her bridesmaids as they walked toward the bridal suite to get ready and relax. My dad followed behind them because of course he did. He couldn't stand not being the center of whatever was happening. And here's the detail that mattered. Nobody turned the mic off. They walked into the bridal suite with that wireless mic still live. And my laptop, back at the reception desk, was still recording the feed. I didn't even move at first. I just watched the levels bouncing on the screen, hearing faint muffled voices through the system. For a few seconds it was nothing, laughs, the rustle of fabric, someone saying "hold still." Then my dad's voice came through clearer, like he'd stepped closer to the mic without realizing it. "Relax," he said. "Once we get through today, everything gets easier." Vanessa giggled. "I can't wait. This whole thing is going to look so expensive." I felt my stomach tighten, but my face stayed calm. I adjusted the gain slightly like I was doing my job, and I let the recording continue. 'Cause something in me knew, people like them always confess when they think no one is listening. A minute later, Vanessa's tone shifted. Less bridal. More business. "So," she said, "when do we get the money?" My dad chuckled like it was cute. "After we sign the papers. I told you it's handled." She won't even see it coming. The word she hit me like ice was she. Because there was only one she they talked about like that. Me. I stared at the screen, hearing my own heartbeat in my ears, and I didn't stop the recording. I didn't cough. I didn't panic. I just sat there and let them keep talking because every second was another receipt. Vanessa said something else then, something about debt and pressure and not wanting problems. My dad reassured her in that confident, cruel tone he used when he thought he was smarter than everyone. The voices dipped in and out as they moved around the room, But enough came through that I could tell this wasn't just mean talk. It was a plan. And the worst part was how normal they sounded, like they'd discussed it before. Like I was a line item. I watched the waveform grow on my laptop like it was building a case for me in real time. When the DJ came back over, I minimized the screen and smiled. "Sound check is great," I said casually. "Everything's clean." He nodded, relieved, and walked away. The recording kept going. When it finally went quiet, I ended the file, saved it, and backed it up twice, once to a private cloud folder and once to a USB drive I kept on my keychain. Then I renamed it something boring, something no one would click on if they glanced at my desktop. At that point, I didn't feel shaky anymore. I felt steady. 'Cause now I had what my dad always feared. Proof. And I want to ask you something here, comment it seriously. If you got accidental proof like that, would you play it immediately and end the wedding before it starts, or would you wait until the exact moment your abuser tries to humiliate you in public so the truth hits harder? I went back to my hotel room that night and stared at the file name on my laptop like it was a loaded weapon. I didn't feel excited. I felt protective. Protective of the version of me who kept trying to earn love from a man who only understood control. And I promised myself one thing. If he wanted to call me a mistake in front of everyone, then everyone was going to hear what he was doing behind closed doors. The wedding day looked like a redemption story my dad had written for himself. The venue was bright and expensive, filled with white flowers, glass candles, and that soft music that makes everything feel more important than it really is. Guests kept saying things like, "This is stunning," and "He really did it right this time," and every compliment made my dad stand a little taller. Vanessa floated through the crowd like she was born for attention. She smiled for photos, held her bouquet just right, and kept checking her phone like the likes were part of the ceremony. Close, she looked perfect. But if you watched her eyes for more than a second, you could see the panic underneath. Not fear. More like hunger. Like she needed this wedding to work. I stayed polite. I nodded. I did small talk. I played my part. 'Cause the truth is, I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to ruin a wedding just for the thrill of it. I wanted something else. I wanted my dad to finally understand that he could not humiliate me for sport anymore. The ceremony itself was almost beautiful. People cried. Vanessa's mom dabbed her eyes. Even my dad's friends got emotional, which surprised me until I remembered something. A wedding makes people sentimental. It makes them believe in new beginnings, even when the people involved don't deserve them. My dad stood at the altar like a man being rewarded. When he said his vows, he kept slipping in little lines about loyalty and respect, like he wasn't the same guy who walked out when my mom got sick. Vanessa repeated after him with a shaky smile, and the guests clapped like they were watching a fairy tale. But I didn't clap as hard. I watched. 'Cause I knew what they sounded like when they thought nobody was listening. Through the ceremony, the reception started fast. Drinks poured. Music got louder. People loosened up. My dad did that thing he always does when he's in a room full of people who matter to him. He performed. He shook hands. He told jokes. He bragged about the wedding like it was a business deal he closed. He introduced Vanessa like she was his trophy and his proof that he was still winning. And then he found me. He walked over with a glass in his hand, smiling like we were a normal family. Vanessa followed behind him, holding his arm. She looked at me and did that sweet fake voice again. "I'm so glad you came," she said. This means a lot to him. My dad's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You look fine," he said, like I was a lamp he'd approved of. Then he leaned in a little and added, low enough for only me to hear, "Don't embarrass me today, Lisa. Just sit there and be normal." I smiled back, calm. "Of course." And he walked away, satisfied, like he'd just put me in my place with one sentence. A few minutes later, the DJ gave me a quick thumbs up from his booth. My laptop was still connected. Projector was ready. The slideshow file was queued. The audio controls were in front of me like a steering wheel. I could feel sweat on the back of my neck, but my hands were steady. 'Cause I wasn't nervous about messing up. I was nervous about how far my dad would go when he had a microphone and a crowd. Dinner was served. Speeches started. Vanessa's maid of honor talked about soulmates and a love story for the ages. People clapped and laughed at the right times. Vanessa beamed like she was being crowned. Then the spoon hit the champagne glass. Ting, ting, ting. My dad stood up. The room turned toward him instantly. He loved that part. He loved being listened to. He lifted his glass, waited for silence, and smiled like a man about to give a generous, heartfelt speech. He started sweet at first. I just want to thank everyone for being here, he said. This day means everything to me. I feel like I'm finally getting a fresh start. People nodded. Vanessa squeezed his hand. Then my dad's tone shifted into something more smug, more personal. Like he was about to make the room laugh. My life wasn't perfect before, he said. I made some errors. Some poor decisions. A few guests chuckled politely. He took a sip, looked around the room, and then he did it. He aimed it at me. But you know, he said, smiling wider, we all have mistakes in our past. And he paused just long enough to make people lean in. Some of those mistakes, he continued, are even sitting in this room right now. Then he pointed. At me. It wasn't a playful point. It wasn't an accident. It was sharp, deliberate, and public. The room went quiet in a weird, uncomfortable way. You could feel people deciding whether to laugh or pretend they didn't hear it. Vanessa's smile tightened, like she didn't want the mood ruined but also didn't want to stop him. My dad laughed first, like that made it okay. Relax, he said to the crowd. I'm kidding. Kind of. My face stayed calm. I didn't flinch. I didn't look down. I just held my Diet Coke and let the silence do its job. My dad looked pleased with himself, like he'd just proven I couldn't fight back. Then he added the line that made something snap inside the room. But then I met Vanessa, he said, and he turned toward her like she was a product he'd upgraded to. And I realized you can always trade up. A few people laughed, but it came out forced and thin. Even some of his business friends looked uncomfortable. Vanessa giggled, but her eyes darted around to see who was judging her. And that's when I saw it clearly. This wasn't just about me. This was about him proving he had power over me in front of an audience on a day he thought belonged to him. I want to ask you something right here, and I really want you to comment it. If your parent pointed at you in a room full of people and called you a mistake, would you stand up and walk out immediately, or would you stay seated and wait for the perfect moment to respond? My dad went on, getting bolder with every second. He made another little joke about how kids don't come with return policies, and people laughed again because they didn't know what else to do. Vanessa's parents looked confused, like they weren't sure if this was normal humor in our family. My dad finished with a dramatic smile. Anyway, he said, raising his glass, here's to new beginnings. Here's to choosing better. Here's to upgrading your life. Vanessa clapped quickly, trying to keep energy up. Others followed. My dad looked straight at me one more time, like he was checking if I was about to cry. I didn't. I simply turned slightly toward the DJ booth, placed my hand near the trackpad, and waited. Because my dad had just done the one thing he didn't realize he was doing. And then I looked down at my laptop. My finger hovered over the button. I didn't look up at the crowd when I hit play. I kept my eyes on my laptop screen, like I was just the helpful daughter doing the one job I'd been given. My dad was still smiling, still holding his glass up, still enjoying the last few seconds where he believed he had total control. The projector lit up and the first slide appeared. A polished photo of my dad and Vanessa on a beach, her hair blowing perfectly, his arm wrapped around her like he was showing off a purchase. Soft sounds floated through the room. People relaxed again, relieved that the awkward moment had passed. Then came a couple more pictures, engagement shots, a fancy dinner, Vanessa laughing into the camera, my dad grinning like he'd won something. For the first 10 seconds, it looked like a normal wedding slideshow. And then the audio started. Not music. Not a romantic song. Clear, unfiltered recording. Vanessa's voice filled the room, loud and calm, like she had no idea she was speaking into a microphone. "God, your daughter is so annoying," she said with a little laugh that wasn't cute at all. "When do we get the money?" The air in the room changed instantly. You could feel it. Like someone turned the temperature down. My dad's smile froze. He blinked once, hard, like his brain couldn't accept what his ears were hearing. On the screen, the photos kept slowly transitioning like nothing was wrong. But in the speakers, the truth kept going. My dad's voice came next, confident, casual, almost proud. "After we sign the papers," he said. "Relax. I'm handling it. She won't even see it coming. I'll use her college fund to cover what we need, and then she's out of my life for good." A gasp shot through the room. Not one person. Dozens. Somebody's chair scraped the floor. A fork clinked against a plate. A woman near the front whispered, "Oh my God," and covered her mouth. Vanessa's parents, who had been smiling proudly all night, both turned toward my dad at the same time. Her mother's face tightened like she'd just tasted something bitter. Her father's eyes went hard and flat. But the recording didn't stop. Vanessa's voice again, sharper now. "And my debts? You promised. I'm not starting a marriage with collectors calling me." My dad chuckled like this was normal pillow talk. "I told you," he said. "I'll take care of it. That fund is sitting there and she doesn't have the spine to fight me. She's a mistake. She'll do what she's told." That word, mistake, hit the room like a slap. 'Cause now everyone knew he meant it. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't family humor. It was how he actually spoke about me when he thought nobody was listening. I stayed seated. I didn't move. I didn't even change my expression. I just let the audio keep playing. Vanessa's voice dropped into something almost bored. "By the way, did you tell your other boyfriend it's over?" There was a split second of silence in the room, like the guests didn't understand what they'd just heard. Then my dad's voice, sudden and suspicious. "What?" Vanessa laughed, nervous this time. "Relax. He knows what he needs to know. As long as you think the baby is yours, we're good." Felt like the entire reception stopped breathing at once. My dad's glass slipped in his hand. Not fully, but enough that the ice inside clattered loud in the silence. He stared at the screen like the photos were mocking him. Vanessa went completely pale. She lifted one hand to her chest like she couldn't catch her breath. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out at first, just panic. Her mother stood up so fast her chair nearly fell over. "Vanessa," she said, sharp and shaking. "What is that?" Her father stood too, face red, looking like he was trying not to explode in front of everyone. "Is that true?" he demanded. "Is that what you've been doing?" Across the room, someone started recording on their phone. Then another. Then another. Little glowing screens popped up everywhere, pointed at the bride and groom like they were a breaking news story. My dad finally reacted the way he always does when he loses control. He lunged toward the DJ booth, shouting, "Turn it off! Turn it off right now!" The DJ threw his hands up, confused. "It's coming from her laptop. She's controlling it." My dad snapped his head toward me like he'd just remembered I existed. And for the first time all night, he looked scared. Vanessa stared at him too, tears gathering fast. "You said you had this under control," she whispered, except she didn't whisper it quietly. She said it loud enough that people heard her, and that only made it worse. Then, right on cue, the cake table got bumped again in the commotion. Someone stepped back too quickly, a bridesmaid stumbled, and the huge cake, Vanessa's precious showpiece, tilted and slid. It went down in slow motion. The crash wasn't just frosting and sponge hitting the floor. It sounded like the last bit of perfect breaking. Vanessa made a sound like a sob and a scream at the same time. She grabbed her dress with both hands and ran. Trayed out the double doors, hair coming loose, veil slipping, mascara already streaking. Her parents shouted after her. Bridesmaids scrambled. Guests stood up, half shocked and half hungry for details. My dad stood in the middle of it, breathing hard, face blotchy with rage and humiliation. And me? I stood by the open bar again, my Diet Coke cold against my fingers, watching the mess they created with their own mouths. If you're watching on Jenny's Karma Diaries, you already know the rule. When someone humiliates you in public, the most powerful response isn't always louder. Sometimes it's just evidence. Quick question, comment this honestly. If you were a guest at that wedding and you heard that recording play out loud, would you stay and watch the fallout or would you walk out immediately? Because what happened after Vanessa ran was the part my dad didn't plan for. Part where his reputation started collapsing in real time, and the consequences followed him even after the music stopped. The room didn't recover after Vanessa ran out. It couldn't. 'Cause once people hear something like that, you can't bring them back with music and champagne. Vanessa's parents pushed through the crowd toward my dad, and for the first time all night, my dad didn't look powerful. He looked like a man realizing too late that his audience isn't his employees. It's 200 people with phones, opinions, and zero loyalty to him. Vanessa's father got right in his face and said something I didn't expect from a man who'd been smiling politely all evening. He didn't yell. He spoke low and firm, like every word was final. "Did you just say you were taking her money to pay my daughter's debts?" he asked. My dad tried to do his usual reset. He lifted his hands, fake calm, fake reasonable. "This is out of context," he said. "Someone edited that." "It's not." But the problem with audio is it doesn't care about his usual tricks. It sounded like him because it was him. Vanessa's mother turned her head toward the guests, then back at my dad, and her face tightened with a kind of embarrassment that looked like anger. "My daughter will not be part of this," she said, like she was making a public statement for everyone to hear. "We're leaving." And they did. They walked out after Vanessa, and half the room watched them go like it was the real ceremony. My dad's business friends started shifting too. You could see them doing the mental math. Not about feelings, about risk, about reputation, about whether being close to my dad could hurt their own image. One man in a navy suit, one of my dad's biggest clients, stepped back and said, "I don't think I should be here," like he suddenly remembered he had somewhere else to be. Another guest whispered, "Did he just call his daughter a mistake twice?" And that one sentence spread faster than the cake ever fell. My dad kept looking around like he was searching for someone to blame, someone to punish, someone to control. Then his eyes landed on me again. He marched toward me, face tight, jaw clenched, and for a second I thought he might try to grab my laptop. But he stopped short. 'Cause people were watching now. Not admiring. Watching. "You set me up," he said, voice shaking with rage. I held his stare and kept my tone simple. "No," I said. "You talked. You planned. You said my name like I was nothing. I just didn't cover for you." His face twitched like he wanted to explode, but he couldn't. Not with witnesses. Not with cameras. And then, like karma adding interest, something else happened. One of Vanessa's bridesmaids, clearly panicking, said out loud, "Wait, the other boyfriend thing. Is that real?" Another bridesmaid stared at her phone and said, "He's here. He's literally here." I saw a man near the side of the room, someone I hadn't noticed before, standing completely still. His face was blank, like he'd just heard something that turned his stomach. Vanessa's other boyfriend, or at least the man everyone suddenly believed was. People started whispering his name. Someone pointed. He didn't even argue. He just walked out fast like he didn't want to be filmed. My dad watched that too, and I could see the humiliation stacking on top of itself. Not because he cared about loyalty, 'cause he hated looking foolish. Now, I want you to comment this because I'm genuinely curious how people think about this part. If you were in my place, would you have felt satisfaction watching it all collapse, or would you still feel heartbroken that your own father could be that cruel? Then came the calls. Not to me. To other people. One of the older guests, a woman my dad always treated with extra respect, stepped aside with her phone and said, "I'm calling the trustee." I didn't know who she meant at first. Then I realized. My grandfather's trust wasn't just family talk. It was real, and people who managed it were real. My dad heard the word trustee and his head snapped toward her. He took one step forward, then stopped himself like he remembered he was in public. And in that moment, I understood something that made my stomach go cold. He hadn't threatened me with the trust fund because he cared about it. He threatened me because he thought he could still scare me into silence. The money was just the leash. As the room emptied in slow waves, my dad's wedding turned into something else. Not a celebration. A warning. I walked to the DJ booth, unplugged my laptop carefully, and slid it into my bag. No speech. No victory pose. Just a quiet ending. My dad didn't follow me. He couldn't. Too many people were surrounding him now, asking questions he couldn't charm away. When I got back to my hotel, my phone lit up with messages so fast it looked like it was shaking. My dad's text came through, all caps at first, like he wanted to scream through the screen. "You ruined my life." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed one sentence, calm and clean. "No, Dad. You said I was a mistake. I just corrected it." Then I blocked him. On everything. And the second I hit block, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Light. Like I'd been holding my breath my whole life, and I finally exhaled. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight coming through a hotel curtain that didn't smell like my dad's house or Vanessa's perfume or anyone else's control. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered the projector, the recording, the cake on the floor, Vanessa running, my dad's face when he realized he couldn't bully his way out of the truth. My phone was still buzzing with notifications from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't open most of them. I didn't need to. I already knew what they'd say. People always want details after a public collapse. They want the story, the side, the explanation. But I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I got up, washed my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. I expected to feel shaky. I expected guilt. That's what I'd been trained to feel any time my dad was upset, even when he caused it. Instead, I felt calm. Not happy. Not proud. Just calm. Like I'd finally stopped living inside his mood. I drove to a fast food place a few minutes away, ordered something simple, and sat in my car eating fries in silence. Sounds small, but it felt like freedom. No one watching me. No one grading me. No one deciding whether I was useful today. Then my phone lit up again, this time from a number I did recognize. Vanessa. I stared at it for a second, then let it go to voicemail. Her message came through in a rush of sobbing and anger. She said my name like it was a curse. She said I was evil. She said I ruined her life. She said my dad had promised her everything and now she had nothing. And the whole time she talked, she never once said, "I'm sorry for what I said about you." Not once. So I didn't call her back. Because I wasn't the reason she ran out crying. Truth was. A little later, I got a message from one of my dad's relatives. Not a close one. Someone who usually only reached out on holidays. It said, "Are you okay?" That was it. Just that. And I realized something. I'd waited years for my dad to ask me that question. Years. And he never did. But the moment his mask slipped in public, people who barely knew me suddenly saw what I'd been living with. That mattered more than I expected. Now here's the part people always ask about. The money. The trust. The college fund line in the recording. After that night, the trustee did get involved. The moment my dad's plan became public, it stopped being a private threat and turned into a legal problem. I gave a statement. I submitted the audio file and the timeline of what happened. I didn't add drama. I didn't exaggerate. I just told the truth. And the truth was enough. My dad tried to call me from a different number later that week. I didn't answer. He tried again. And again. Then he sent a message through a family member, saying he wanted to talk like adults. That made me laugh just once in my kitchen alone. 'Cause when I was a child, he didn't talk to me like an adult. He talked to me like property. So I made it simple. I stayed no contact. I updated my passwords. I locked down my accounts. I made sure there was no way for him to access anything of mine, financially or emotionally. I talked to the right people. Kept copies of everything. I didn't do it because I wanted to punish him. I did it because I finally understood that peace isn't something you beg for. It's something you protect. And if you're still listening, I want you to comment this. Do you think going no contact is cruel, or do you think it's sometimes the only healthy choice when someone keeps hurting you? I updated my passwords. I locked down my accounts. I made sure there was no way for him to access anything of mine, financially or emotionally. I talked to the right people. Kept copies of everything. I didn't do it because I wanted to punish him. I did it because I finally understood that peace isn't something you beg for. It's something you protect. And if you're still listening, I want you to comment this. Do you think going no contact is cruel, or do you think it's sometimes the only healthy choice when someone keeps hurting you? A few days after the wedding, I heard through someone else that Vanessa had moved back in with her parents. The wedding was effectively over, even if it had technically happened on paper for a moment. The photos my dad paid for didn't matter. The perfect night didn't matter. Everyone who mattered to him had heard what he said about his own daughter. And in my dad's world, reputation is oxygen. Once that oxygen was gone, he didn't look so powerful anymore. I'm not going to pretend it didn't hurt. It did. He was still my father. A part of me will always grieve the dad I wanted him to be. But grief and freedom can exist in the same place. That's something I didn't know until I lived it. On my way home from work one evening, I drove past a wedding venue with lights in the windows and music spilling out into the parking lot. For a second, I pictured Vanessa in her dress running out again, and I felt the strangest mix of sadness and relief. Because that wasn't just her running. That was me, too. I ran out of a life where I had to earn basic respect. I ran out of being the scapegoat. I ran out of being the punchline. And I did it without screaming. Without begging. Without fighting in circles. I just let the truth play. If you're watching this on Jenny's Karma Diaries, I want you to remember something the next time someone tries to humiliate you. You don't always have to defend yourself with emotion. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is stay calm and let people hear who they really are. Before you go, please comment your own story. Have you ever been publicly humiliated by family, and did you ever get your moment of karma? I read the comments, and your stories matter here. And if you think someone you care about needs to hear this message, share this video with them. It might be the reminder they need to stop accepting family as an excuse for cruelty. Make sure you're subscribed for more stories, because there's always another mask that slips. This is Jenny's Karma Diaries, and this is what I learned the hard way. When someone calls you a mistake, they're telling you they don't deserve access to your life. And karma? Karma doesn't shout. Karma just hits play.